Hello. Welcome back to Let's Talk Ray Bradbury. If you've not yet subscribed to our channel, please take a moment to do that now. All right, I haven't done 2 a day Ray Bradbury videos in a long time, but going to do it today because we had 2 short stories. This is the second one. It is from The Dust Returned, as all these recent reviews have been. It is here called Chapter 17, The Theban Voice. So, synopsis. I was the bastard child of the hinges of the great wall of Thebes, says a voice. This very strange being, is in the house, seated at the long table with all the family members, including young Timothy, who is writing down what he hears. The voice explains that the first bronze hinges were invented to hold up the massive gates of the city of Thebes thousands of years ago. And as of yet, the gods had no voices. However, when his hinge began to squeak, the parishioners at the temple began to pay attention and to his every creak, and then the priest would eventually begin to interpret it as the word of God. So he gave voice to the gods. Over the centuries, trying to silence him with bear grease and other substances, the voice of the hinge, the Theban voice, makes his way around the world, traveling from squeaky object to squeaky object to eventually arriving here in the house where young Timothy, studied with his family members, is beginning this process we've discussed in the recent chapters of how to define themselves and how to catalog each of the strange, disparate members of their family. He asks the voice how to define himself, and he says, "Call me a tribesman of the talkers with no wind," which is obviously an inanimate object, but doesn't have to breathe, doesn't have any voice or lung, but somehow makes a noise. But the more questions that Timothy asks, the longer the answers get. The voice tells him, "Hey, that's a good thing to write down. So write that down. The more you talk, the longer your answers get." But then Timothy asks suddenly, "How do you spell Theban?" And the story ends. All right, so we are slowly being introduced to this house of strange beings, but few have been, as of yet, defined clearly as to what they are. There's no sign of traditional movie monsters here, other than the mummy. But for the most part, these are strange creatures of the night that don't really have any clear definition that you could lay behind them. You might not say, "Oh, is he a werewolf or is he a vampire?" But there's some hints of those people existing in the family, but it's not clearly mentioned who is what. But I can imagine. I love how, first of all, how Bradbury here gives humor and life to a otherwise ageless, inanimate object, such as a hinge, but more so the voice of the hinge, the sound of the squeak, than the hinge itself. So I can imagine Bradbury sitting at his office in Los Angeles. I think he was in Los Angeles for most of his career, down in the basement, at his desk, behind his typewriter, looking for something to write about, and then he hears a squeaking hinge at the door, and suddenly he begins to type, and here we have the Theban voice. I'm reminded of, oddly enough, the Transformers movies. I think it was Revenge of the Fallen, where the old Decepticon who changes sides says, "My father was a wheel, the first wheel," and I sort of imagine this character being like that. I was a hinge, I was the first hinge, and I give that hinge voice. But, on the whole, I like that we're again here being reminded that Timothy is, though a normal boy, a boy nonetheless among people or creatures with very long, interesting stories to be told and to be chronicled if he will take the time to listen. And that seems to be his superpower. He's a mortal child, but he has curiosity. I think that very much relates to Bradbury, who I think you could easily say that he is Timothy is Bradbury's surrogate here. And that's often the case in his fiction, which features a young boy protagonist, where it's basically he's putting himself in the story that way. Curiosity leaves most people with age. Bradbury never seems to have lost it, even to his dying day. And I hope that I never do. I mean, I'm afraid that maybe I have in some cases, but I hope I never lose that curiosity, and I hope that rereading or reading Bradbury now and sharing it with you will help me to maintain the fire of curiosity in me. Lastly, although this is another very, very short story, unlike a lot of the stories in this collection, where they feel like bridge pieces and connections and all part of the framing device of the tale, this actually does feel fairly cohesive as a story, as if there's actually a journey that has gone on from the ancient Theban gates right down to a early November day or night in this strange house in Illinois. All right then, next time we'll be looking at Make Haste to Live, which was actually new for this collection in 2001. So be sure to tune in again tomorrow to see what that is all about. Thank you, and until next time, keep